Deathwatch.
Hello, and welcome to With a Whimper, a Savage Worlds Adventure Edition campaign with Deathwatch Productions. I'm Brandon, the Game Master, and we'll be using an amalgamation of different settings, including a lot of ideas from my own mind for this adventure, but the basic game is the Savage Worlds Adventure Edition, and so first we'll introduce our players, starting with Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm going to be playing Ezekiel, a young elf mage shaman. What do we got in this?
Yeah, elf mage.
Okay, so elf mage. And apparently I have a dog companion or something.
No,
nope,
don't.
Not anymore. He disappeared. Ignore that.
I'm Travis. I'll be playing Asher, a human hacker type who is a bit of a lazabout by the looks of it, but has a strong streak of curiosity. So I'll be getting us into most of the trouble we get into over the course of this, I'm sure.
And Asher has a
He
dog.
stole my dog. Like all humans.
I'm John playing Thoradrim, a dwarf rigger who has a bit of a heroic streak, but he tries not to show it. His tough exterior, soft, warm middle.
Okay, so let's dig into the history and set up the world that you all live in. So you all live in a town in what would be in our day classified as high desert, called Desperation. Desperation is a small settlement situated inside the remnants of an ancient circular highway on-ramp in a vast temperate / desert climate. In the distant past, an elevated road 100 feet above the western edge of the on-ramp carried traffic north and south, while on the ground the pavement stretched east and west. The wrecked remnants of cars, so plentiful that one would think every man, woman, and child in the old world had owned one, had long ago been scavenged and salvaged from the roads within a few-mile radius of Desperation. Beyond that radius, ruined, rusted wrecks lined both sides of the highway, for as far as the eye could see, waiting for the day that people grew brave enough or desperate enough to venture out to strip them of whatever valuable salvage could be had. Desperation is a town of somewhere above in between 200 and 300 permanent residents, though at any given time there would be a couple dozen or so more as traders and scavengers pass through to ply their wares or rest up before continuing on whatever journey they were on. Most live within the larger ring outside the center, but close enough as made no difference. Some of the citizens lived further out in farmsteads, away from the protection of town. Those brave souls farm the desert and resolutely refuse to allow raiders, thieves, and dark, mutated wildlife to chase them away from their farms. Sheer stubbornness with a smattering of passed-down ancient knowledge and their own bright ideas, they grow food for the town and enough for trade as well. Despite Desperation being situated in a desert that seemed to stretch on forever, it is blessed to be above an aquifer that still has water. This blessing, like all blessings in the broken world, has barbs attached to it. There's plenty of water, but it is buried deep. The wells of Desperation are hundreds and more feet down, but the drills, pumps, and purifiers still do their job, drawing on some unknown source of power. Unknown years of improvised repairs means that very little of the original apparatus remains, and people in Desperation are starting to worry about what will happen the day that nobody remains who can keep the pumps and purifiers going. The settlement itself is a collective of every manner of structure and vehicle that can be modified to serve as a habitation. Buses, shacks, tents, and shipping containers, purpose-made mobile homes, and habitats from the ancient world all nestled together in a vaguely circular arrangement. Near the center is a fountain made long ago with bricks that serve as a public water source and as a good enough landmark around which the various people with items or services to sell can set up shop. Desperation has a mayor who is elected by the adults every 5 years. Stories say that, well, the mayor right now is a man named Harold Hargrave. He's been the mayor for as long as just about anybody can remember. When he won his election, he gave his endorsement for the office of sheriff to a man named Herschel Nolasco, who won that office. Since then, nobody has ever even bothered to run against Herschel Nolasco for sheriff. And it was only the next election where someone bothered to run against Harold Hargrave and was defeated. Since then, nobody's bothered to run against him either. So the laws in Desperation are few and simple. Don't steal. Don't assault. Don't make trouble in town. Come to the town's defense when called on. It's not in the town's best interest to interfere in people's lives any more than absolutely necessary because everyone is essential. Desperation is pretty self-sufficient, but as I said, some of the wiser members are starting to understand that the old world machines they depend on for water and power aren't going to last forever. And as of late, the mayor has been encouraging those who make their living by scavenging in the ruins of the old world to venture further afield, hoping to find power sources or materials that can be used to repair the aging infrastructure, such as it is. But it's a dangerous endeavor, as there are things in the desert whose attention should be avoided at all cost. There are ruins of an old city far to the south, but nobody from town's ever been there. The people who have passed through on their way that direction have never come back north. So this is the town that you all live in. Desperation has 4 circular 3-story domed structures that are the only structures remaining of the old world and that are still used for the purpose to which they were put in the old world. And those are the pumps. These 4 buildings pump the water from so far deep that nobody knows how far down it goes, but they pump the water up from an ancient aquifer. And that provides enough water. It's like, so you live in a desert, but water's not actually a concern for anybody. At least right now. Like I said, nobody's gone down to see, if there's a big pit with water in it, right. It comes up from these pumps. So that's the town that you all live in. And then we've got some story to go through here. So first, let me find my... All right, so let's go through some story here. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. T.S. Eliot, The Hollow Men. Has any man ever been so wrong? The Blind Man. So, this is your points of view. Bright light hurts your eyes. Loud sounds hurt your ears. These are lights and sounds, but you don't know that. You're a passive receptor, incapable of thought or judgment. You exist only to record observed changes. You're vaguely aware that you possess appendages, and you note their existence as they enter into your field of vision, flailing wildly. When they leave your field of vision, they no longer exist, and then they exist again. Some apparition floats into your sight, blocking the brightest of the lights. Some sound emits from the apparition, and then the apparition is gone as suddenly as it appeared. Soon you realize that something is slowly blocking the light, and that the sound is becoming muffled. You realize instinctually that this is not what you want. You struggle, but there is no outward sign, and then you cease to exist. Your eyes open, and you exist again. Sensations, memories, Thoughts flash through your mind. Each time you have existed, you have struggled mightily to exert control, to somehow increase the duration of your existence, and to increase the variety of sensations to record. Now you have learned that you can control those appendages, though it requires an extreme effort. More apparitions appear in your vision, floating objects that emit sounds. Some of these sounds are familiar, some of the apparitions as well. There are other things to see now, objects attached to the barrier at the end of your vision. You remember the sensations those caused as they get bigger in your sight. Of all the sensations you have observed each time you come into existence, these ones are unique in that you do not wish to catalog them again, but you do. Like all children, by the time you become aware of yourself and begin to understand your form and shape, all of the sensations, the data that you observed and cataloged in order to reach awareness, has been locked away and forgotten. You recognize the bright lights and the loud sounds for what they are, and the notion that you ever did not know doesn't enter into your mind. The apparitions you recognize to be faces, and those faces connected to bodies like your own, only larger in size and varied in composition. You know those faces and bodies belong to people, and those people do not cease to exist when you are unable to see them. You know that some of those faces bring you comfort, but most of them bring you terror. Those odd shapes you saw attached to the barrier at the end of your sight you now know to be tools attached to the ceiling. You know that those tools exist for one purpose only, to bring pain. You know that those faces that bring you terror control those tools, and worst of all, you know that so far there is no sound or combination of sounds that you can make that will stop them from hurting you. You know because you have tried. You have better control over your body now, but there is nothing you can do with it to stop the pain either. There are others like you, other children. You like some of them. You do not like others. But all of you share the same situation. You're starting to understand the concept of reason, but it brings no satisfaction because now you know there must be a reason for what is done to you, but you are incapable of imagining what that reason might be. Some time has passed. You vaguely understand the concept, but not enough to determine with any accuracy the degree of it. Though the concept is explained to you, as time passing bringing change, in your case, it seems not to have done so. The pain continues. But then something does change. You are strapped to the table, and the pain is about to begin when suddenly there are new sounds, sounds you have never heard before. It seems that the men, all of whom bear the name Doctor, have not heard the sound before either, as all of them stop and look at each other. They are frightened. You have seen the look on the other children's faces often, never on the face of the doctors and nurses. The sound is painfully loud and repeats itself endlessly. The lights dim and a new light appears, this one red and flashing. Then another new sound, a loud boom, so loud in fact that it shakes the walls and the table you are strapped to. It is followed by another and still another. Then you realize that underneath and behind the new sounds is yet another, this one not as loud but increasing in volume as it approaches. This sound exists in short, repeating bursts and is accompanied by shouts and screams. As it gets louder and closer, you start to panic. The doctors and nurses are huddled together behind a large desk, peeking out toward the door that you cannot see. You call out to them to let you free, but they ignore you the same as always. The door explodes inwards, and the doctors and nurses scream in terror. You feel a flash of something you have never felt in such terrifying strength before, and by the time you are old enough to understand that feeling as satisfaction at seeing the doctors and nurses experience the terror that they continually subjected you to, you will have forgotten the experience. A group of men burst into the room, dressed in clothing unlike anything you have ever seen. Their heads and faces are hidden underneath hard, dark helmets. They carry tools in their hands that bark and spit fire, and the doctors and nurses are reduced to bloody tatters. The new people don't hurt you. Instead, they release you from the straps and hold their hand out to you. They speak softly, assuring you that they will not hurt you. Something about their voice soothes you, and you trust them. You take their hand, and they lead you away. Out in the hallway, You find the other children, all being led by similar men. As a group, they lead you away. This, too, you will forget. Sometime later, some distance away, 4 men stand together atop a pile of broken asphalt underneath the ruins of an old world overpass, looking at the lights of a settlement in the dim dusk. Their armor is covered in road dust and in need of care, but still serves its purpose. Behind them, 4 young boys huddled together, crouched down in a hollow between boulders and chunks of asphalt. They watched the 4 men, waiting to be told if it was safe. They were the last 4 boys of the group that had been rescued. Many had went in different directions when they had finally reached the surface, and those who had come with this group had peeled off as they went, each to destinations of their own. "This should work," one of the men said to the others. "Agreed," said another. "Big enough to be successful, remote enough and populated by people that know how to mind their own business." Another scoffed. "Don't kid yourself. There never was a group of people gathered together that could mind their own business, but at least they will think it bad manners to pry directly. Operational secrecy will need to be maintained at all times. Don't get complacent, gentlemen. Stick to the plan." The others all nod their agreement, and then they begin to strip their armor and clothing, exchanging it for normal clothes. They stow their armor and weapons in large packs and call the boys forward. When the 4 men, followed by 4 boys, entered town, there was nothing to identify them as anything but 4 men and their sons seeking refuge from the wasteland. The town was big enough that there were plenty of empty habitations to choose from. By the time you become accustomed to calling the man you live with father or dad, you no longer remember a time when you didn't. In fact, by that time, you no longer remember that you ever lived anywhere else. As you grew, you always felt connected to those boys that you came here with, but none of you remember that there was ever a time before you lived with your pa in desperation. Old enough to hear, too young to understand. You're probably 8, at least that is what your dad says. You stand in the common room of the Salvage Emporium in the center of desperation, holding a sack of scrap you and your dad gathered up from what he calls renovations you and he have been performing at your house. The word is alien to you, but you take it to mean cleaning because that's what you've been doing for the last week. Your dad thinks he can get a little bit of money for the scrap, so he is talking to Solveig Iron Shaper at the counter. She is a pretty dwarf woman that you like because she always smiles at you. You're supposed to hold still and be quiet, and you are. You're pretty good at both when you have to be. Your friends' dads are there as well, sitting at some of the tables that people sit at to drink. They're talking with some of the other adults about normal, boring adult things. This needs fixed. This is going to cause a problem. That's going to break at the worst time, the weather, and on and on. A man steps into the common room from outside, taking off his hat and kicking dust off his boots. An outsider, one of the traders that comes through town from time to time. Traders used to be exciting for you, but anymore you find them boring. You pay them no attention, and neither does anyone else at first. The trader looks around the room for an empty seat, but he stops suddenly, and his eyes widen slightly when he sees your dad. This is John's memory, by the way, this particular section. He tries to cover it by looking elsewhere, but your dad noticed it, and you notice him notice. And you guess maybe he knows your dad from some other time he passed through town. By the time your dad concludes his business with Solveig, you have dismissed the matter from your mind entirely. But 2 days later, you happen to be in that common room again when a farmhand from the Quinn farm, that you recognize but have never spoken to, comes into the common room, sweaty and breathing hard. He asks if anyone has seen the sheriff, and then breathes a sigh of relief to see Sheriff Nolasco sitting at a table a few feet away. He blurts out that something must have happened to the trader because his mules and all of his goods were found wandering around the Quinn farm, which is a day east of town. The sheriff says he will go see if he can find out where the trader got to, but a few days later, when you ask your dad, you learn that the sheriff couldn't find hide nor hair of him. Your dad says, "The world outside his town is dangerous, and those who wander it take great risk doing so." He ruffles your hair and tells you to get your chores done. You tell him you already did your chores, which you did. But he just smiles and says, If they're not done how I taught you, they aren't done. You stomp off to do your chores again. He's right. You didn't do them properly, but you still believe this to be fundamentally unfair. The steel dust. Everyone dreads their 13th birthday. You dread other people's 13th birthday too. That's when people change. Not everyone changes, but there's no way anyone has been able to determine to predict if someone will or will not. Most people go to sleep and wake up the same as any other day. But some people experience the worst pain they can imagine, and when they come to, they see a stranger in the mirror. You've all had friends go through it, and they all seem to come to grips with it afterward eventually, but still, nobody wants it. But for you and most of the other children of desperation your age, you almost didn't need to worry about the change. You almost didn't make it to your 13th birthday. Not long after your 12th birthday, the steel dust came. On the horizon, it looked like any other dust storm, which was a relatively common occurrence that drew little concern. It wasn't until it hit that everyone realized that this was no ordinary dust. This dust was metallic, and when it covered you, it started to move, working its way into your mouth, eyes, ears, and nostrils as though alive. It caused mild discomfort for the adults, and in their case didn't seem to be trying to work its way into them, but the children all became sick. Even after the storm passed, it was all you could do to catch your breath between coughs and sneezes as your body tried with all its might to expel the foreign substance from your lungs. Nobody could explain it, but the adults all said that it had happened before. Most of the young children seemed like they weren't going to make it. You couldn't eat and could barely hold back coughs long enough to drink water. The steel dust came out in your waste, tears, and sweat. Parents had to tape pads over their children's hands to keep them from scratching their skin off. You all hold that time to be the most miserable you have ever been. After what seemed like an eternity, but was in fact almost exactly a month, fevers broke and you started to feel better. A couple of weeks after that, you were back at full strength, and as is the way of people, the misery was already starting to be enveloped and muted by the passing of time. The change. This section here is Ezekiel. Ezekiel, you lie on your bed in your room. There are manacles on your wrists, though they are so large that you can easily slip your hands in and out of them. People said, sometimes when someone changes into an orc, they go a little mad with pain and get violent. So as a precaution, it's common to chain them up beforehand. There are manacles around your ankles, too. These are as big around as buckets, and you could literally pass your whole body through them. These were in case you change into a troll. People said that when someone changes into a troll, the pain is so intense that they always run, as though they can escape it. Trolls are so big and so strong that the only thing to do is stay out of their way, but your dad didn't like the thought of you running out into the wastelands alone, so he fashioned these manacles and bolted them to the wall. As you lie there, waiting for sleep, you realize that if you do change into a troll, that chain is either going to tear right out of that wall or it's going to pull the whole damn wall down. You don't think your dad considered that. Sleep finally takes you, by surprise as always. When you wake, there's no pain. You find yourself deep in a forest at the edge of a pond. You recognize it as a forest because they've been described to you in stories, not because it's something you've ever seen. You've never seen so many trees. And then as you look at them, you realize you've only ever seen maybe one or two trees in your whole life. These are nothing like those stunted, malformed growths that represent trees for you. These are vibrant, healthy, and proud. Just the color of the world threatens to overwhelm you. It is as if for the first time in your life you're seeing what the world is supposed to look like. The water of the pond is more clear than any water you've ever seen, and if not for the occasional ripple, you think you wouldn't even be able to tell it was there. Fish jump playfully in the pond, their scales reflecting beautiful rainbow colors from the bright sun overhead. A soft breeze bearing no hint of rust or decay flows gently over your skin and shakes the leaves of the trees. You lean forward and peer down at the surface of the water, and your own face reflects back at you. It is your face, certainly, but it has nevertheless undergone a change. Your eyes are larger and now have an ever so slight upward tilt. The color has changed as well, with a deep forest green taking place of the brown. Your eyebrows now angle sharply towards your hairline. Your cheekbones are more prominent, your mouth smaller in proportion. Most striking, your ears have grown, now elongated and sharply pointed, almost reaching to the top of your skull. You catch movement to your side, and you turn to see a massive wolf a dozen feet away. She stands at the edge of the pond, her paws in the water as she lowers her head to drink. She's a beautiful wolf, gray and brown. Her fur is thick and clean. She lifts her head to regard you with steel-gray eyes. In her gaze is nothing of the wasteland dogs you're familiar with. The wasteland dogs always have a mix of fear, nervousness, and hunger. The she-wolf regards you as a mild curiosity that is of little interest. Her gaze carries the message, I will allow you to live for now. Tempt me not. You feel a change in the air and turn back to the tree line just as a figure emerges from it. It's a deer, a buck, with large antlers that come to 4 points spread wide from each side of its head. It stands tall and proud. It steps confidently toward the water, stopping between you and the she-wolf to drink from the clear pond. When it finishes drinking, it turns toward you and lowers its head, pointing its antlers at you. It paws at the soft soil, as though preparing to charge, but it stops and turns its head back to the trees. The trees and grasses move aside to make way for an old man who approaches you. He has long, silver hair, elven features similar to yours. His face bears the signs of great age, but his body seems undiminished. He's dressed in earth-colored robes and bears a staff with a lantern attached to it. He smiles as he comes to stand before you, and you feel a warmth spread through you that stands out as a completely singular sensation, which you can compare to nothing you have thus far experienced. Up close, he's taller than he seemed, a head taller than you. You gaze up at him and feel a familiarity that you cannot explain. You are both certain you know him and certain you've never met this man before. Hello, Ezekiel, he says. He points over at the buck and the she-wolf, who stand regarding you and the old man. I see you have met my beautiful friends, Wolf and Deer. He gazes at them for a long moment before turning back to you. Deer is supposed to run from Wolf, and Wolf is supposed to chase. The world is sick, out of balance. It is beyond my power to repair. You must help. When you wake, tell people you have suffered a great pain. If you don't, the others will become jealous. You will need help, and people will have little trouble finding reasons to regard you with suspicion. As it is, the world must be restored. She will need your help if a balance is to be restored. If the balance can be restored, then Deer can run and Wolf can chase. The old man smiles down at you and places his hand on your shoulder, squeezing it once gently. Suddenly, you find yourself awake, sitting on the edge of your bed. The little pale, sickly moonlight that can pierce the dust-soaked sky filters in through your open window. You run your hands over your face and feel the change you saw in your vision. Even your hands are different, more finely formed. The old man, whoever he was, had told you that you would not feel pain that other people experienced from the change, and he was right, but he was also wrong. Physically, you felt no pain, but as you looked out the window at the blasted, washed-out, dust-covered, rubble-strewn wasteland of browns, blacks, and grays, you feel a deep, depressing weight settle over your shoulders as you think of that pond with its clear water and the straight, proud trees that thrust their vibrant green leaves toward the sky. And it is at this point for you, Ezekiel, that you realize suddenly that you have the low light vision, right? And this section is for, what is your Thoradrim? Thoradrim, you lie on your bed waiting for sleep and struggling with nerves. Your dad put some manacles on your wrists that are too big in case you change into an orc, but it's hard to find a comfortable way to lay with them on, and you keep finding yourself sliding your hands out of them without thinking about it. There are 2 large hoops at the end of your bed that you have your feet through, but they're so large they don't even touch you, so they're not bothering you. Those were for your legs in case you turn into a troll. Everyone said changing into a troll hurt the most, and that makes sense to you. Growing from 5 feet something tall to 8 feet something tall and packing on 400 pounds in the span of an evening would probably cause some discomfort. You and your close friends had been talking about the change for the last 6 months. It seemed like that was the only thing you and your friends had talked about. Same with all the kids your age. Your dad always brushed it off as though it wasn't all that important. You knew he was just trying to keep you from worrying about it, but he was worried too, even if he tried not to show it. Your dad is what you worry about the most. In your mind, all of your friends were missing something important. They all talked about what it would be like if they changed into one thing or another. How much would it hurt? How hard would it be to adjust? Things like that. You remembered the last conversation that you'd had with Asher the day before. Asher was especially preoccupied with the matter of clothing. It seemed to be his biggest concern. Where am I going to find boots if I turn into a troll? Where am I going to find underwear even? It'll take a whole cow for enough leather to make a pair of pants, he said. Can my dad afford that? Maybe we can afford 1 pair, but do you think we can afford to have multiple pairs of pants? Not to mention shirts, and a new coat, obviously, boots too. That's a lot of cows. I suppose we'll need the cows anyway, since I'll be eating a lot more, but I just don't see how my dad can afford it. His eyes had widened suddenly as a thought occurred to him. What about the toilet? Can you imagine how big a toilet I'll need? We're going to have to build a whole new bathroom, he'd said, shaking his head as though he was pondering over the amount of work that would take. True, it was a practical concern, but you thought everyone was overlooking something much more fundamental. How is your dad going to react if you wake up and you're not the same race anymore? This was the worry tumbling around in your mind as sleep finally overcame you. When you awoke, it was to the most extraordinary pain you'd ever imagined. You were vaguely aware that you were screaming, but even if you'd had the presence of mind to put a stop to that, you would not have been able to. The scream tore from your chest, savaging your throat as it burst forth, but that scream was quiet compared to the creaking, cracking, popping sounds of your bones reorganizing themselves. You felt your skull split apart, flatten and spread. You felt joints pop out of place while the bones in your legs shrank. Then you felt your muscles and tendons tear as the lost strength was redistributed to circumference. Then, when it seemed like every bone, muscle, and tendon in your body had been snapped, crushed, or stretched beyond its limit, a new agony arrived, as the healing that would normally take months if it happened at all took place in a matter of a couple of hours. Your body began to itch so deep that no scratching could reach it. In the end, there was nothing to be done except to roll on the floor screaming in agony until your voice was gone and your consciousness fled. When you finally awoke, without the mind-destroying agony, you took stock of yourself and realized that you had become a dwarf. There were already plenty of dwarves in Desperation, so you knew that at least the other citizens would have no discomfort with you, but it still remained to be seen how those closest to you would react. You had a rough month after that adjusting. It's pretty much universal for teens to experience a period of clumsiness as their bodies grow faster than they can keep up with, but it turned out that going in the opposite direction was much more difficult. Okay, Asher, like all children, on the night before they turn 13, you lie on your bed in your room at the repurposed house you live in with your dad, his wife, and 3 other children. Technically, the room is yours and the oldest of your 3 siblings, who is 2 years younger than you, but given the circumstances, he has been moved out to the living room for tonight. You are manacled in the same manner as everyone else is the night before, all the precautions that people have thought to take, given the randomness of the change. A little aside, in Desperation, I had already said before that there are few laws and that everybody was necessary, and that means that the people don't get into other people's business much. One area where that is not the case, where tremendous social pressures are applied, is that children are not allowed to be alone and people need to couple up. So in most cases, marriage is not a function of love like it is in our life. It's like it was for most of human history. It's because people need each other. And so in your case, Asher, the woman that your dad married, her husband had died and she had children. And so he agreed and they've formed a family. And so they're not related to you by blood, but
Stepmom and
yeah. Now, it happened when you were old enough that the window wherein you might consider her a mom, it had passed.
right.
But she is a good, kind woman, and so generally you get along with all your new family. Your dad sits a couple feet away in a rocking chair that he fashioned himself out of scrap metal cut from an old car. He has a flute in his lap, but he's not playing it yet. For now, he is much the same as he always has been: quiet, thoughtful, impassive, unreadable. Well, unreadable to most, but not you. You can read your dad like a book, and you can see that he's worried, even if his face gives no sign of it. You and your dad are close, even if words between you were generally sparing. His worry worried you, and you knew that was precisely why he was trying to hide it. It all had a sort of feedback effect where you were worried more by the fact that he was worried, but him trying to hide his worry from you had a reassuring benefit that brought you back to baseline. You spot movement at the door. A little head of blonde with bright blue eyes is peeking in at you. Cassandra, your 6-year-old sister, idolizes you, and despite stern direction from both parents for the other children to stay out, she can't help herself. Family and desperation works a little different than perhaps it might have in the ancient world. As I said, there's tremendous social pressure for unions, and children are never left to fend for themselves. Often, this means that families consist of people with no actual relation to each other. And that was the case here. Cassandra, both of her parents had died of illness a year apart from each other. Your two brothers were Claudia's children before her husband died. And then after her husband died, your father agreed to marry her, joining your families, and Cassandra was brought in, and she took a liking to you instantly and has been your constant shadow ever since, to the point that you have learned to watch very carefully when you're out and about to ensure she's not following you somewhere she shouldn't be. You can tell she's worried about you. You remember her solemn expression yesterday at the family meeting where tonight was discussed as she handed you her doll. She informed you quite confidently that the doll would protect you, and you knew that it was a difficult thing for her to part with, even for just a night. She sees that you have noticed her and tries to duck back out of sight, but fails and rushes into the room to dive on you and wrap you in a hug. After some time, your father manages to get her untangled and out the door, and once again it is just you two in the room waiting. Your dad begins to play a soft, soothing tune on his flute, and as you drift off to sleep, completely against your will, your last thought was that no matter what happened, your dad would have your back. When you wake up, you see a terrified look on your dad's face. Do a notice roll for me. It's one of your skills.
3.
Cassandra comes in, and she screams, and it's like, it's shocking how loud it is.
Oh no, what have I turned into?
Yeah, and she's like, he's more hideous than we ever imagined.
Oh,
Do another notice roll.
I got a troll. Oh, wait. Never mind. 11.
Okay, so Cassandra is not yet a good enough actress. And so you see right away that they had planned this little prank on you. Cassandra is, if you remember playing hide and seek with Heather when she was 6,
Right.
much like that, where she would just laugh so loud that you'd find her because she's excited. That's much like Cassandra here. So you can see, right away that, they agreed to play this prank, and you look in the mirror and you see your face same as it was. Now, there's one more change for some of you that took place not long after this. This one was somehow even more strange. One day, those who had reached the age of the change, even those who had not changed, felt the effects of a phenomena even more unexplainable. That is, most people had sudden debilitating headaches and felt the sensation of tearing skin and muscle as over the course of a few hours, metallic growths appeared at their temples, bursting forth from the skin with blood and dripping silver liquid. Nobody seemed to know what caused it, but just about everyone in town of that age experienced it, whether they had changed or not. Nobody seemed to understand the purpose of it either, though it appeared as though it was formed to allow something to plug into it. No experimentation had ever produced results that anyone would desire to replicate it. So it's at this point for Asher and for Thoradrim that these, what we'll call a data jack appeared at your temple. And it's one of those things that a great many of the adults have them too. And nobody ever thinks about it because they're just, you sort of forget about them in your day-to-day life. Nobody knows what they're from, why they're there. The doctor in town, that is Jerry Tavares. She's an old woman, but in her 50s. She's the doctor. She refuses to try to remove them because she said that the doctor that trained her had tried it when she was very young, and it always ended up in death. So people are just told to ignore them. And in your case, Thoradrim, let's see if I can find that again.
Does his jack follow the rigger style one where it's in a different location?
It's in the same, but so to nobody's surprise, even if they could not explain it, forget I said that. For you, Ezekiel, this same thing happened, and this metallic thing burst from your temple, but it just kept going until the whole metallic object pushed itself all the way out of your body and fell to the floor. And whatever it was, it had a sort of, it had a short tubular section, which seemed long enough to extend just into your skull. And then after that, dozens of almost imperceptibly thin strands, like elongated spider's legs, that you imagined in horror would wrap around or perhaps through your brain. These devices, whenever they were rejected, because they were rejected on some other children as well, would last about a day before they invariably liquefied and turned into a puddle that reminds you a lot of that metallic dust storm. It left like a film, almost a liquid film on everything that reminds you of that. Nobody knew why some people rejected them, as there seemed to be no rhyme or reason to it. Reuben Morrow, which is one of your friends, rejected his as well. So, and he's a troll. It clearly had no connection to race. Those who did not reject him just learned to live with them, and most people, after a time, forgot they even had him. They took on the effect of scars that most people's eyes slid off of when looking at him. For Thoradrim, this whole experience seemed to be worse for you than for other people. You had the same experience as everyone else, but for you, the pain seemed to extend down through your neck to your spine, and you imagine you could actually feel metal fusing with the bone there. Nevertheless, after a few days, the pain was gone, and although everyone's fingers subconsciously rubbed at that small port of their temple, soon enough they faded to the back of the mind where those things are kept that may be important one day, but that no more time can be devoted to at the moment. This is all stuff that you guys experienced around your 13th birthday and a little before. Now we'll lurch forward 3 years later. But first, a couple of quotes here. So, First Testament with the Whimper. Don't you understand what I'm trying to say? Can't you feel the fears I'm feeling today? If the button is pushed, there's no running away. There'll be no one to save with the world in a grave. Take a look around you, boy. It's bound to scare you, boy. Ancient proverb, Barry Maguire of the old world. The day is cold and dark and dreary. It rains, and the wind is never weary. Rain is very rare in desperation, situated as it is in what was a desert even before whatever calamity devastated the world. You have little reference for it yourselves, but all the traders and passers through, no matter from which direction they come or how far away they had started, said the same thing. The world everywhere had been struck by some cataclysm, and little remained of what had once been. People were smart enough to realize that the natural order had been disrupted, even if they had no notion of just how stark the differences were between now and then. Desperation, most people say, was in what would have been classified as high desert. Some of the people in town, considered very wise, spoke of the mountains to the west that could be seen on very rare days when the sky was clear, blocking rain clouds that would come from further west, where some traders said was an endless sea of salt water and acid. When rain did come, it was usually in the springtime and generally not considered something to celebrate, as it was as likely to be water as acid that scarred flesh and ruined crop and livestock that were not hustled into shelter quickly enough. Today, blessedly, the rain is not acid, but it falls in fat, heavy drops that sting when they hit flesh and make loud, clanging sounds as they impact the repurposed steel rooftops. Clouds that produce it are deep black, and they seem to hover just out of reach. It's just before midday, but outside it looks more like dusk. The wind howls through the streets of desperation, blowing sand and broken weeds, strong enough to make it seem as if the rain is falling diagonally rather than from straight above. Most people are taking shelter inside homes and empty shacks waiting for the rain to stop. A small group are standing on the porch that runs along the entire street-facing side of the salvage emporium. The floor of the porch is made of wood, the only building in town to have so much of the rare material. The roof of the porch is composed of the hoods of a couple dozen cars lined up in a row and bolted onto old axles that jut out from the building. The rain slides off the old rusted hoods into a long gutter channel, and from there it trickles along to a pipe that runs underground, where it will supposedly make its way back down to the purifiers that sit deep below town. You three are all standing on the porch, near the end, next to the downspout, listening to the waterfall. Further along the porch, closer to the door, are some older men, all smoking cigarettes and speaking to each other about those concerns that older men share, but which generally fail to find any purchase in your own attention. You have all been called here because Thoradrim has been given instructions to gather you and meet Freya and Volfax Ironfist here at the Emporium. Thoradrim has been apprenticed to Freya and Volfax, who manage North Pump. Your instructions had been to get those two friends of yours and meet them here, where they would secure the part they need for some repairs and then give you your instructions. When you arrived, one of the men close to the door had said that there was a meeting taking place inside and that you were told to wait until it was over. Meetings in the salvage emporium were not rare. In general, important meetings for town business were held there, as it provided the space to accommodate everyone and was located at the center of town. Thoradrim, you do not know what task you are to be given that requires your friends, but you had heard Freya and Volfax grumbling the last few days about pressure problems. So you guessed that you'd be doing some pipe reparations, but you have no idea why that would require your friends, both of which had been apprenticed elsewhere and had not shown any signs of mechanical aptitude like you have. You had asked for an explanation, but had not been given one. Freya and Volfax are good, gentle, patient teachers, but once they have given an answer, or not given one, as the case may be, they consider the matter closed, and they viewed repeated questions as an affliction that could only be cured by the assignment of additional chores. So, you're standing on this porch, and there's North Pump, East Pump, West Pump, and South Pump are these four large domed circular buildings situated in town. And it just so happens that all of them are managed by dwarf families, because they generally, dwarfs seem to have an affinity for, mechanical fixing things. And it just shook out that way. So Thoradrim was apprenticed out to the Iron Fist family, and they've got 2 kids. And so you've been living there at North Pump with them. That's another thing about desperation, along with the family thing that I told you about. It's not the kind of world where someone can like take a year off to find themselves.
Right.
People are expected to, find a way, apprentice themselves out so they can continue to be beneficial for the town. Thoradrim was apprenticed out to the Iron Fist at North Pump. So the Salvage Emporium is a massive building in the center of town, and out back is a huge junkyard, because there are 4 separate salvager outfits in desperation. I say in desperation, even though most of the time they're not in desperation. They're basically, the best way to think of them is sort of like biker gangs, because they build their motorcycles and they roam around the wasteland finding
Stuff.
whatever they can find, and they bring it back to town to the Salvage Emporium. The Salvage Emporium itself is also run by a dwarf family, the Iron Shapers. And it's a big enough building that it actually serves as both a town hall for town meetings. It serves as an inn and a tavern for passing traders, and a common room for citizens of desperation who are thirsty at the end of a long workday. So it serves many functions, and that's where you find yourselves standing out on the porch. Now would be a good time, if anybody's thought of it, if you want to describe what your character looks like. You want to give your character a description?
Yeah, sure. Well, I remained human, so I look like that. I got permanent, it's wispy. I guess it'd be like 5 o'clock shadow for a teenager, right? So it's coming in
peach fuzz.
patches here and there, peach fuzz most of it. I keep sort of like a crew cut going. And at this point, I'm kind of have like a dour look on my face. I've said, good morning, but then basically looked off to those mountains to the west, as I'm accustomed to doing. And I don't know, like are we wearing like buckskin type clothing? And
Yeah, so
I got leather armor. I saw that much.
Yeah, you're wearing leather clothing and wool,
Right.
leather and wool. So Desperation there are south of town in a strip are 4 ranches. So there is the Caldwell Ranch, and they raise sheep, and there's the Thornton Ranch, and they raise sheep, and the McBride Ranch raise cows, and the Burks raise beef, and those are all situated, a half a day away from each other, but on the same line, east to west, more than a day's walk south of town. And because of the water situation here, they're doing pretty well. And so everybody has wool and leather for their clothing. That's basically what you got.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the long and short of it. I mean, I'm trying to cultivate the mustache currently, but it's not working out. Probably Dad's already said,
Gunslinger
save
mustache.
that crap up. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I want to get it twirled, but it's like, it's just not working so far.
Oh, sorry. There's the 2 sheep, the beef, then 2 beef ranches, and then there's also a horse. There's a horse ranch out there too.
Do we have our own horses?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
All right, Chris. What about Ezekiel?
Are we going like Lord of the Ring elves or more Shadowrun?
Up to you, man.
Might as well, right?
Describe your character, yeah.
So I figure he's tall for his age currently, so he's probably going to sprout up a bit more. Lanky, and then like just kind of quiet because of that tongue tied. That's how I'm going to play it off, is like he's usually quiet or stuttering. And he's just at that awkward teenage, well, as awkward as you can get in a apocalypse, right? So he's just kind of quiet, always kind of watching, looking around, like that dog or the wolf from The Thing.
Okay.
Just kind of always hunched over and watching.
Okay. And Thoradrim.
As he's just under 4 feet, kind of stocky, solid built, got like wide shoulders, thick limbs, typical dwarf. He's got some wild auburn hair that he likes to try and keep tightly braided, and just like I believe it was Asher with he's got a patchy beard that's just starting to come in. It's a source of some embarrassment, but he still oils and combs it proudly because he's convinced that one day it will be legendary.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that dwarves in this game will hold in common with all dwarves ever, is the beard is extremely important to dwarves. So yeah, you'd put a lot of effort into that. Yeah, for sure.
It allows them to access the webway.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh no, dwarf lore.
So also, and then of course, also standing on the porch with you or close to you are 3 of your friends. And Esther Thornton gets the most attention for being one of only 3 elves in town, but also, and what that does for her looks. She would have drawn eyes even if she hadn't become an elf. It just turned the dials up higher. She's very attractive. She's a natural communicator and has a way of getting along with everyone that leaves her with few rivals who aren't motivated purely by jealousy. She's dressed in well-made woolen pants and tunic with a thick leather duster and hat. She is the daughter of Ezra and Abigail Thornton, who own a sheep ranch south of town. She gets bored easily and so frequently manages to find a reason to be anywhere but on the ranch. Right now, she's just waiting out the rain before she heads home for the day. At the moment, she's standing by her horse, fidgeting with the straps and making sure that her rifle is covered from the rain. The rifle, which Esther is already gaining a reputation for her skill with, was made for her by Crag Boulderclaw, the orc that stands beside her, talking softly to her about said rifle. It's a pipe rifle, but Crag Boulderclaw lives and works at the McBride Ranch, which is owned by Silas and Eliza McBride. The McBrides raise cows, and Crag, even though very young, is well loved by the McBrides, both for his generally smooth demeanor and his work ethic. The McBrides are known as good masters, and when season and workload permit it, they often give their employees time off. It is just such a day for Crag, and on those days, he usually comes into town to meet up with any of you to see what trouble or adventure can be found. Crag has not shown any particular natural affinity for mechanical work like Thoradrim, except when it comes to firearms. From a very early age, he began constructing his own firearms based on those he had seen or those he had dreamed up, and he was constantly to be found scrounging through junk piles in search of materials. It was Crag Boulderclaw that built all of the guns for you guys. His own is hanging on his back by a thin leather strap. It's a short gun, a little larger than a heavy pistol, but still meant to be held with 2 hands. It is made of a mad amalgamation of pipe, wire, wood, bolts, and screws. It holds long, curved clips, as he calls them, which hold a great amount of the small bullets that he seems to have a never-ending supply of. In addition to Esther's rifle, he had also built the guns each of you use, and the massive pistol that he built to size for Reuben Morrow. When Crag is not working or building new guns, he can be found poring over a tiny book that he had found some years ago. Little more than a few pages held together at first by staples and now by twine, he treated it like a precious religious tome and spent a lot of time flipping through the pages and running his fingers across words that he can't read. The entire booklet was written in the old tongue, which nobody could read. But he had asked a ranger who had passed through town once if he could read it. The ranger, as was common with his kind, had little to say, but he had pointed out a particular section and said that it read, Home of the Brave. Cragg had asked the ranger what that meant, because if anyone knew, it would have to be a ranger, as they traveled more than most. The ranger had only said that a lot of knowledge had been lost, but he thought it referred to a mythical place, that it still existed somewhere out there in the wasteland, it was said. It was said to be a place of plenty and peace where everyone had a voice and could sleep out in the open with all their belongings in plain sight and not fear any thieves. Though Cragg has not told anyone except for Asher, who is his closest friend, he firmly believes that such a place exists out there, and he hopes to strike out one day to find it. Standing on the porch, on the porch with you also is your friend Reuben Morrow. Not finished growing yet. He is over 7 feet tall, and despite his bulk, he still appears a bit gangly when compared with the troll you are all most familiar with, that being Grum Boulderfist, who is one of Sheriff Nolasco's deputies. Right now, your friend Reuben stands quietly, gazing out into the rain. The porch of the salvage emporium had long ago been rebuilt to accommodate the height of trolls, so it's one of the few places where one can rest comfortably without worrying about hitting their head on the ceiling. Reuben is friendly with all of you, but he's mostly Ezekiel's friend. Flashback, over 3 years ago. Ezekiel, you land hard on your rear in the dust. The impact reverberates through your body, and you feel snot burst from your nostrils to dangle over your lip. The push had been sudden and much more forceful than you had expected. You look up at the boy glowering down at you, his head blocking the sun so that his features are a dark shadow. You don't need to see him clearly to know what he looks like. You've seen him plenty by now. Reuben Morrow is a boy, about a year younger than you, but bigger and stronger, and none too shy about showing it. Reuben is the undisputed terror of your generation. Loud, brash, and confident in his farm-built strength, he frequently finds entertainment in bullying others. His family's reputation, and most importantly, his mother's reputation, coupled with the general indifference toward interpersonal struggles of children amongst the adults of desperation, mean that he is mostly left to do as he pleases, and for the targets of his behavior, the choice is basically to learn to accept it or put up a fight. Thus far, nobody has chosen the latter, but today is that day for you. When you had asked your father for advice, he had been absolutely direct and absolutely sincere. You had changed about 6 months ago, and exactly 3 days later, Reuben had decided that he didn't like you. Not fair, but hey, what is? It will only stop when you stop it, your father had told you. He had looked at you for a long time after saying that, before poking a thick, scarred finger in your chest just firm enough to hurt. It will only stop when you stop it, he said again, adding emphasis. "Oh, did that hurt?" Reuben taunts. "Did it break your pretty little elf bones?" Some younger kids who have gathered around laugh at this. Most of the kids around your own age remain silent, some of them casting murderous glances at Reuben. You know from talking to them that all of the other kids are fed up with Reuben, especially since they too are often targeted by him when you aren't around. You clench your jaw as you rise to your feet, determined to put an end to this. You have had plenty of time to observe him over the last few months, and you know you're a better fighter than him. He's heavier and stronger and dangerous, but he's a clumsy brawler, and you think you've got his number. "Fight!" the gathered children start to chant as you and Reuben close the distance. A little bit of backstory on Reuben Morrow. Reuben Morrow is the youngest son of Tabitha Ma Morrow, who owns a farm west of town. Ma Morrow is notable for a few reasons. First, she's notable in that the randomness of change seems not to apply to her children, as all of her children who reached the age underwent the change into orcs. Until Reuben, she had 2 sets of twin boys who all turned into orcs. The second set both reportedly died in farming accidents, and she had 2 children after that, Reuben and a girl born just a couple years later named Dinah. When Reuben underwent the change, everyone was surprised that he became a troll. Just last year, when Dinah reached the age, she stayed human. Mom Morrow is also notable for the fact that everyone who works on her farm is either an orc or, now as in Reuben's case, a troll. Mom Morrow herself, and now her daughter Dinah, are the only humans out there. Ezra and Caleb are her 2 oldest living boys, a set of twins who both changed into orcs. They're known to be extremely rough and rowdy and for terrorizing the other employees, and Reuben is not spared their brutality. There were a few things that happened after Reuben's loss to Ezekiel on that day, and a few rumors that spread through town. There were some children of an age with you, or a bit older, that were emboldened by Reuben's loss. They took this as evidence that he was all bark and no bite, and so some thought to repay him for his past behavior towards them. They thought that him losing the fight against a smaller opponent was proof that he had no skill for fighting. Reuben was uncharacteristically patient with these boys, but when they pressed too far, he very effectively disabused them of their notion. Even in this, though, gone was the Reuben of before, who would have gloated in victory or reclaimed his position as the designated terrorizer. Losing the fight against Ezekiel seemed to have changed him into a completely different person. After that, he generally preferred to be left alone, and when interacting with other children in work or play, he generally spoke little and focused on his tasks. There was a rumor that spread regarding the reaction of his family to the loss of the fight as well. People said that when he got back to his farm, word had beat him there, and his older brothers had set on him right away, angry at what they considered a stain on the family name. Farm workers said that Reuben quickly turned the tables on his older brothers, and that it had taken 4 of them to pull him off. They said that the older boys had been bedridden for 2 weeks after that, and that to this day, neither of them dare meet his eye. In regards to you, Ezekiel, a few days after your fight with him, he'd shown up at your home while you and your dad were patching the roof, and rather than looking for a rematch, he came and apologized. Ever since that day, he has become one of your closest friends. When he changed into a troll, you were there to help him make the adjustments. Now he stands under the porch watching the rain fall, contemplating whatever it is that he so often contemplates. Finally, sitting patiently at Asher's feet, ever so slightly leaning into you, is Volg. Volg is a beautiful dog, somehow absent any of the afflictions common to the species from the toxic environment. Dogs are not very common, and all of them suffer from random mutations. Most don't survive birth, and of those that do, most don't survive long after. Those that survive are born with missing legs, or more legs than they're supposed to have, or missing parts of their jaws, making them unable to chew food. Some are born with their skin inside out. Some are born blind, or some are born conjoined with one or more of their siblings. The lucky ones are able to survive with the odd leg growing in the wrong place, or with less hair, or with less legs than they should have, but still enough to manage. The ranchers especially have been breeding dogs for as long as anyone can remember, trying to breed out the deformities. The dogs they breed prove very useful in managing their herds. People say that they are ever so slowly having success, that now 2 in 10 pups survive instead of 1 in 10. One thing is for certain, though, no dog looks like Volg. Volg is what dogs would look like in a world unspoiled by radiation storms, metal dust storms, and tornadoes born of fell energies ripping through the veil between earth and hell, a world free of rivers of boiling chemicals and acid rain. Nobody knew where Volg came from. Asher, you were leading your horse east of town to the Duncan farm to help with the harvest one day when you were 10. You hadn't been paying attention like you should, and a rad roach had attacked you. It spooked your horse, and it would have killed you, but for Volg appearing out of nowhere to save you. The only clue you could find as to his origin was a collar around his neck with a metal tag that said Lobo Volg. So you called him Volg, and he has been your companion ever since. Now, Volg causes no small amount of jealousy. Most people have a hard time seeing the beauty of what could be and be unable to possess it. There had been some talk back when he first appeared. Some people had made the argument that he shouldn't be considered just your property. He should be considered the property of everyone. Some people had brought forth the idea that he should be confiscated for the public good. You hadn't been privy to those conversations in the town council, but your father had spoken in a town meeting, and whatever he said put that to bed right away, and nobody's brought it up again since. But more than a few have tried to bribe him away by feeding him treats or lavishing him with attention. For his part, Volg is all too happy to eat whatever tasty morsels are provided and soak up all the attention that is offered. He's always been friendly to everyone who is friendly to him, and he has a particular fondness of children, whom he lets get away with all the ear-tugging and tail-pulling as he engages in endless games of chase with them. Despite all efforts, though, he remains loyal to you and you alone. He follows your commands. Everyone else's he views as mere suggestions. Most everyone has come to accept matters as they are, to varying degrees of resentment. The farmers and ranchers have engaged his services for their breeding, and it is most definitely improving the gene pool. Already full grown when he first met you, Volg is showing no signs of aging. And there's something else that you have noticed about him that you have not as of yet told anyone. He heals extremely quickly. After a time, with the fat raindrops still beating down upon the metal roof of the porch, the door of the salvage emporium opens, and Sheriff Herschel Nolasco steps out. The sheriff is a big man, broad of chest and wide shoulders. His dark brown face is hard and weathered, with substantial wrinkles at the corner of his eyes. His dark hair is shorn short and is now starting to show some gray. He scans the surroundings as he reaches into the pocket of his leather duster and produces a battered tin case from which he plucks a hand-rolled cigarette. He nods to the adults to return their greeting and flicks a match alight with his thumb. Sheriff Nolasco has been sheriff for over 20 years by now. They said he had been elected after the mayor, who had been elected the day before, endorsed him. Since then, much like the case was with the mayor, nobody had bothered to run against him. He was simply too well regarded by the people of Desperation, and if there were anyone who had thought about running for sheriff in the last 20 years, they would have seen how pointless it was to attempt it. With a few minor exceptions, there just wasn't anyone in town who didn't hold him in high esteem. He was known to carry a thick stick, more of a staff really, which you note is absent at the moment, banded at the ends with steel and polished to a dark shine, which he called the stick of justice. He was all too happy to use that stick if he needed to in his efforts to keep the peace. Over the years, there had been a complaint here or a complaint there from people who thought he had been a little too rough with them after they woke up bruised and battered after a night in what Sheriff Nolasco called the drunken disorderly lodging. But the plain fact was that in Desperation, where everyone knew everyone else, and quite well in most cases, the general opinion is if Sheriff Nolasco takes after you with the stick of justice, you deserved it. In fact, there are many who often felt that if Sheriff Nolasco took to you with the stick of justice, you deserved it way sooner. Sheriff Nolasco flicks his spent match out into the muddy street and approaches you, stepping past the adults with long, confident steps. Behind him, Grum Boulderfist steps out of the salvage emporium onto the porch and follows his boss. Grum Boulderfist is one of the few trolls in town, and he's so large that it's difficult for the mind to accept. Ezekiel, do a notice for me, please.
There it is.
Okay. And then, so the sheriff strolls up, or stops in front of you three. Boys, he says in greeting. His eyes don't rest on any of you for long before they take up a constant scan of the street and down beyond you. Y'all gonna help Freya get them pumps fixed? He asks.
Nod vigorously.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think I'll start answering, but let them.
That's
You
good.
betcha.
That's good. You're good boys. You be careful down there. Watch each other's backs. Lots of twists and turns, and nobody knows all of them. Bound to be danger down there. He turns to look at Esther, Crag, and Reuben over by the horse railing. Y'all be heading home today? He asks. Esther says yes, and the boys both nod. Sheriff Nolasco nods, and then his focus shifts to the horizon behind them, as if he's deep in thought, and has already forgotten the people he was talking to. He's silent for a moment, and then he lowers his voice and steps closer to them. You three do me a favor. Travel together for as long as you can before you split up to your homes, and keep an eye out for strangers. When Esther asks him if there's anything specific that he's worried about, he just says, just always good to keep an eye out. And with that, him and Grum, Boulderfist, walk out into the street and disappear. And then you are able to go inside now that the meeting is over. So stepping into the Salvage Emporium, it's a huge ramshackle building of much more sturdy construction than it would appear from the outside. See, the outside looks like a giant amalgamation of stacked, flattened cars and sheet metal from one source or another. But on the inside, you see that it had a steel frame to it, and it's much more sturdy than it looks. The room is warm, lit by radiators that are powered by the town's mysterious source of electricity. And the large room is furnished by many tables spread throughout, and each one is unique in its construction, made of all manner of random salvage materials. There's a large counter or bar by which stands Freya and Volfax, who are drinking from glass jars and speaking softly to Arvid, Iron Shaper. One section of the wall behind them holds shelves of glass bottles and jars of the few kinds of alcoholic beverages that can be purchased, all of them made by citizens of desperation. There's hard cider and apple wine made by Ma Morrow, clear spirits made from wheat and potatoes by the Quinns, and darker spirits and whiskey made by the Duncans. There's various beers and ciders that take up the remainder of the shelf. To either side of the alcohols, the shelves and wire racks are filled and covered with various valuable scrap and salvage items. The Salvage Emporium is the center of town, both literally and figuratively. It's used as a tavern and an inn for passing traders, a common room for thirsty citizens, a town hall for full town meetings, and a council hall for town council meetings. It's owned and run by the Iron Shaper family of dwarves, composed of husband and wife Arvid and Solveig, and their two children Halvar and Runa. Volfax waves you over, and when you reach him, you see that the long counter is stepped up periodically along its length, constructed specifically so that the taller people can stand on one end and shorter people on the other, and the counter will be comfortably set for each of them. And behind the counter, the floor is ramped so that the dwarves who run it will always be relatively eye to eye with the patron they're speaking to. On the counter between Freya and Volfax is a dented red toolbox. Volfax and Freya are who Thoradrim is apprenticed to, so Volfax is best described as sturdy even in comparison with other dwarves. He very truly might be exactly as wide as he is tall. His body, owing to whatever mysterious designs of the gods or nature, stores every last extra ounce of fat directly in his belly, which juts straight out in unlikely solidity, stretching the buttons on his shirt. He has thick, scarred arms, and his hands, which are disproportionately large for all dwarves, are even more so. They seem composed entirely of scar tissue, and he's missing his third finger on his right hand and a pinky on his left hand. Bright white teeth seem to glow from behind his enormous, bushy black beard, which is well kept and shiny from the gear grease he uses to keep it styled. His black hair is swept back and tied with a cord, and a tight-fitting brimless cap is fitted on top of his head. He looks mean, but as you approach, he smiles at all of you, and a metamorphosis is so complete that it shocks even people who know him. Freya, Iron Fist, stands next to her husband, and she is a marked contrast. Though in human or elf terms she would be considered squat or stocky, in dwarf terms she is anything but. Slightly shorter than her husband, she's just a tad shy of plump. Her own black hair is pulled back into a loose assembly of braids, bunched together to keep them out of her way. Sharp blue eyes look out at you above a nose that would seem more at home on a human woman's face. She also generally maintains an expression that gives the mistaken impression that she's not very nice. Her smile dispels that notion immediately. They're both wearing large, thick tool belts, which hold a vast array of homemade and salvaged tools of every sort. "Ah, good, you chose the good friends," Volfax says as you stop before him. "I was afraid you'd bring the knuckleheads, and this is too important. Water pressure is way lower than it should be on the west pipe. We need you to go find the problem and fix it," Freya says. "Take your tools, and with what's in here, you should have everything you need." She slides the dented toolbox over to you. Volfax looks at Asher and Ezekiel. "You three," he says, clearly also including Volg, whose head he gives a friendly pat, "are going along to watch his back. There are endless number of tunnels down there, and almost none of them have been mapped, so there's no telling what vermin is lurking down there. No doubt roaches and rats. So make sure you take your weapons and make sure your batteries are charged up on your flashlights." The north pump is responsible for sending water to the farms west of town, that being the Morrow Farm and the Duncan Farm, and for the majority of the town's water. A toolbox in hand, you step out of the salvage emporium onto the porch. The rain still falls, but you have a task now, and the rain won't hurt you, so you step out into the muddy street and make your way north to North Pump, following Volfax and Freya, who trudge ahead of you with their heads bent together, talking softly to each other. Volg trots on ahead of everyone, splashing through puddles and sniffing everything he comes across. The streets are mostly empty as you make your way across an ancient railroad tracks that run east-west through the center of town. Some of the oldest citizens of Desperation talk of a train having passed through town along those tracks in the distant past. They said it was a ghost train from the old world, given its own dark intelligence and driven mad by the cataclysm. They said it screamed as if in agony as it chugged along at impossible speed, delighting in any opportunity to run over anyone or anything unwise enough to stay on the tracks. But most people think that's just a story, and nobody's ever seen it in your lifetime anyway, a train running through there. North Pump is a large domed building of the old world made for the purpose to which it was still put, managing one of the 4 massive water pumps that bring water up from the aquifer deep in the earth. Above ground, it's a large 3-story building. The central portion of it is hollow. It's like a hollow shaft that extends down into the depths. It was theorized that the pump jack itself in ancient times might have been brought all the way up to the ceiling of this building, and that would allow people to work on it from the catwalks on each story. But now it's just, an empty shaft. If there was a way to bring that up there, nobody knows how to do it anymore. The Iron Fist family had repurposed some of the rooms, and they lived and worked here managing the pump, which is the same case with the other pumps. Now, very little work is actually done on the pump jack itself, as nobody really knows how to. These days, all of the maintenance was done on secondary systems and on the hodgepodge of improvised solutions that had been dreamed up over the years just to keep it working and keep the water flowing. But that is where you go to start this first little task you've been given. And Volfax and Freya say that, they give you some directions. You need to go 5 flights down, and you'll see a pipe, and you need to follow it and find out wherever it leads and find out where the blockage is or what's causing the pressure to be incorrect. So they have pressure meters here, and that's because nobody knows how much water's down there, but nobody wants to assume it's infinite. So they do ration it out to the farms to the west of town from this pump anyway, so that they can continue to grow crops. But Freya and Volfax say that over the last few days, they've not been getting as much pressure on the return as they should be. So that's what you guys have been asked to search out and go fix. Now, a few things about the world that that you would know that I didn't specifically mention. We'll jump back real quick to the Salvage Emporium. Something important to learn about the Salvage Emporium is that it is 100% neutral territory. It's sort of like in the John Wick movies, the hotel. No violence of any sort is allowed to take place there. So there are 4 salvager outfits that make Desperation their home. And these are, hardly any of them actually live in Desperation. They've got their own clubhouses. They're not civilized people. They're wild and violent, and they're as likely as not to fight each other at any given time. But because they've got to sell their salvage in town, they need a place where everybody can be assured can just be devoted to business and not violence. So that's what the Salvage Emporium serves that. It's almost a religious rule in town. Like if people were in the common room drinking and got in a fist fight, it would be enough for the whole town to talk about because it's just not done, right? Even the sheriff, who technically doesn't have to, he's technically the one exception to the rule. He's even been known to wait until people leave to arrest them if they needed to be arrested, right? So that's one thing about the Salvage Emporium going forward for you guys to remember is that there's no violence is allowed to take place there. And then we'll go over some smaller details that you would know as citizens of Desperation. And we talked a little bit about Reuben Morrow and his family. Ma Morrow, runs a farm, she's got all the orc children somehow. And her farm is entirely run by either orcs or trolls. And she also has like a dark reputation. There's nothing that anybody would ever be able to prove, but she is considered the type of person whose bad side you don't want to be on. And there have been people that have disappeared that people have believed and whispered disappeared because she made them disappear. So she's got, she makes like the hard cider and apple wine and stuff like that. And there's rumors that she doesn't particularly appreciate that some of the other farmers make their own alcohol that competes with hers. And so there's rumors that she's got a more than friendly relationship with one of the salvager outfits who do some dirty work for her time to time. Being good friends with Reuben, that's not something he's ever brought up. Mm-hmm. He's like, the change was so drastic after you beat him in that fight that he's not like he was before that. So he's not a very talkative guy. Mm-hmm. And generally, it wouldn't be considered good manners to say, hey, do you think your mom is a secret murderer?
Yeah.
So, but you do know that he doesn't particularly get along well with his family. Mm-hmm. So that's what you'd know about that. And I think that tells us everything we need to know about the world in order to get started on this. So we'll be using the Savage Worlds Adventure Edition system, which we haven't spent a lot of time playing in. So there'll be a lot of a learning process as we go, as we figure out how the system works and how it's different from ones we've used before. So we'll just have to be patient as we work our way through that. But you stand in North Pump. And actually, let me share with you guys an image of what Desperation looks like.
There we go.
See it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So up at the top is North Pump. That's where you're at right now. This big building in the sort of the center is the Salvage Emporium. And each of you have the homes you live in are in some of these other areas of town. Over to the right above East Pump is the mayor's office. And then the sheriff's office is just this little section, this little building just below the Salvage Emporium there. That's what the town looks like. But you're in North Pump. And so you step in and it's a circular building. And so the rooms have doors all along the perimeter of this floor. And most of them have been repurposed for the family or for storage or whatever. But then there's stairs that lead up to the next floor with the exact same layout, with rooms on the outer perimeter. But the catwalk around the central portion of this building is a steel catwalk with a metal railing, and you look down into absolute blackness. And it's about 50 feet in diameter, this shaft that goes down into all the way to infinity as far as anybody knows. So off of the first floor is where you'll find the staircase, the stairwell that leads down. And it's one of those things, like, it just keeps going. And so nobody's ever explored it all because it just keeps going, and nobody has time to just...
And it's awfully dark.
Yeah, and it is really dark, yeah. So you've been given like a Thoradrim, you've been given instructions on where to go, and you know where to go to get to where you can start exploring the western pipelines to find the problem. So you know where to start. But after that, you'll be going into an area that you haven't personally been in before. Now, a few other important things to talk about. So, after that change, when the data jack appeared in your temple, Asher, nobody around town knows what it's for or what to do with it, like I'd said. But you did a lot of experimentation, and there... in town itself, or north of town, is a junkyard that nobody goes to anymore because they figured they've got all the stuff they need out of it. But kids go there time to time because it's fun to explore. You got giant, stacks of crushed cars and shipping containers, and it's a giant maze that you can have a lot of fun in. Dangerous, but still fun. And you happen to find a cable that fits perfectly in. And so you also found in that junkyard, and this is a thing, like, it'll be up to you to decide, to tell me if you've told any of your friends. But as of right now, you're the only one that knows about this. But you found a cable that slides perfectly in there. And on the other end of it, you happen to find this old, like, mostly broken plastic box that you could plug the other end into. And you sort of fade out of, when you plugged it in, it's sort of like you went into a trance because you were kind of vaguely aware of what was going on around you, but most of your attention was on, you don't know, it's from the old world, you're positive. You don't know what the purpose might have been, but you find yourself controlling this little, basically it's just a little yellow dot going through a maze, eating other dots, and then you would get chased by ghostly figures. And you've spent so much time doing it, but you're doing it all with your mind.
Right.
So it was at that point that you realized what this thing was or could do. And so since then, you've been looking for other things that you could plug that cable into.
I can see the initial scene.
Yeah.
Well, wish me luck, Volk.
And
yank this thing off of me. It looks like I'm hurting.
There's another thing that happened to you, that has happened to you, and that is, like, very randomly and for just the briefest of moments, when you've been around other people that have that data jack, like you've gotten a flash in your vision of a line, or emanating from it, like maybe a sound shooting off from it, out into wherever, right? You've caught flashes of that here and there, and it almost felt to you like you could hear what that sound was. And then that's your secret, and you can decide if you would have told your friends or anybody else about that.
Well, I suspect not directly, but all of my questions would have, those who knew me well would have known something with it, because I'd have been like, what do you think this thing's for anyway? I mean, we can plug something into the wall, we get power, that sort of thing.
You ever see sound just bounce off someone's noggin
Right.
No, Asher, I don't think I have.
So, yeah.
Thoradrim, you have a secret of your own, and that is you like to build stuff and fix things. You're good at it. You have a natural affinity for it, and you always did, but after the change, it went into overdrive, and you actually have created out of scrap materials and some odd circuit boards that you've found. You've created this little metallic spider device. And you realize much the same as Asher that you can actually, you can feel a sense of passing information back and forth. Now, you've found other machines that you didn't make where you're not able to do what you can do with this drone, this little spider that you've made. But with this little spider, you can actually set it down, and then you sort of lose track of what's going on around you, but you can actually control it. And it's like you can see through the little camera on it and make it move. So I'll leave that up to you if that's something you would have shown to anybody. But
Well, Thoradrim would definitely know more than the rest by the nature of my questions that I'm having some sort of similar experience.
yeah.
I like the idea that, because
Yeah, I might share it with Asher just from that. I mean,
Yeah.
seems
'cause
like
he's-
we'd have that in common.
Yeah, because he's been asking questions that are like way too on the nose for somebody who has no idea what's going on, right? So both of you have been, keeping your eyes out for other ways you can use this. But I'll say that for now, only you, Asher, have gotten that sense of other people, right?
Right.
And then Ezekiel, you don't know nothing about that, and you don't have one of those day jack, but you are starting to become concerned because from time to time, like the world will just absolutely change right in front of your eyes, like every color, and it seems like all of a sudden, like the world is being split by oddly colored purple and green lightning everywhere. And one time, you were looking at Grum, the deputy, Grum Boulderfist, the troll deputy. He's one of the only people anybody can think of that came here from somewhere else. Everybody else was born or has lived here. He showed up, apparently, and started working for Sheriff Nolasco. One thing that, people whisper because he's so big and so strong, nobody wants to get on his bad side, so people are careful what they say about him. But it was like one summer, and he's going around like everybody does to help with the harvests on farms. Everybody's like, he never takes off his coat, no matter how hot it is. I mean, he's pouring sweat, and he never takes off his coat. And one time you were looking at him, and like you got this outline of him. You could see like a bright glow from him, but it was missing on his arms, both of his arms. It was like suddenly he's just standing there and he doesn't have any arms. You saw that one time. And every now and again, when you're looking at other people, you're looking at Asher and be like, oh, I've seen Asher a million times. I know what he looks like. And you'll get that flash where your vision changes, you're seeing odd colors and stuff. And it's powerful. It almost, you can feel it in the pit of your stomach. It sort of makes you sick, but you'll be looking at Asher and you'll see a blank spot right at the corner.
ain't got no brain.
And then you've seen it one more time with Thoradrim where he's had that blank spot, but also like there's a big chunk of his back between his shoulder blades that doesn't have that.
Yeah.
So I'll leave that up to you if you would have told anybody about that.
This is what I like to think is because we all experience something to do with like color or and vision. I like to think that we're all hedging around the topic, but we all don't just go like breach over. So like you ever see like purple and green lightning split? No, but what about so it's one of those where because I don't think I'd go full into that. That's getting into crazy town territory. And then like it's enough where whatever Asher and Thoradrim are hinting at, it's not that. But so it's just one of those where keep your head down and just let them do the talking.
Okay. Oh, but also Thoradrim, I forgot to mention this to you, but after you changed, you realized that you see in heat signatures now because you've got that infravision. That's where we'll pick it up next time.
Alrighty, man.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So is it like a Old West type patois for the accent?
That's how it started,
Yeah,
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was hearing in my head.
Yeah, like about midway through, it went from like me being kind of like speaking.
This has been a Deathwatch production. Thank you for listening.